Before sunrise, the atrium's pool is a dark mirror. Oil lamps shiver against painted walls. You kneel by the threshold, fingers raw from sand and lime. The floor is clean, but the household isn't. Nothing in this house is clean. A bronze bell stirs the air. Footsteps. A door opens, and cool night folds into the corridor. You've slept 2 hours. You rise without a sound. The other women glance at you the way people glance at open flames. Not pity, calculation. The steward is in a counting mood. He will count measures of grain, shirts not returned, whispers overheard. He will count the months since your last period. He keeps 2 ledgers, one for linen, one for bodies. Outside, the first cart rattles past, the city waking. Inside, the master's wife smooths her hair and chooses a ring. When she looks through you, you steady the water bowl. Steady your breath. Steady the thought that almost speaks. Because in this house, words aren't currency. They're evidence. And today, evidence is the most dangerous thing you carry. The steward's numbers will decide whether you are a servant or an asset to be bred. Marble columns, processions, laws etched in bronze. Rome sells an image of order. The city shouts it from arches and forums: justice, discipline, civilization. But the streets feed into doorways, and doorways open to rooms like this one where the machine runs on people. On you. We are in Italy, primarily Rome and Campania, 160 BCE to 150 CE, with glances into Roman Egypt where paperwork survives. That's our scope. The terrain is not the whole empire, not every century, not every province. Records suggest wide variation, and scholars debate details. But within these walls, urban houses, rural estates, workshops, female slavery had patterns, incentives, rules. They were enforced less by courts than by proximity. Rome's law declared enslaved people property, but the economy demanded their skills. That tension, thing and person, pulled hardest on women. You were a cleaner of marble and a keeper of secrets, a nurse in the nursery and a body in the ledger. Your labor could be public, your suffering private. Your motherhood could be profitable to someone else. The key question for this story is simple and terrible. How did Rome's systems, legal, architectural, domestic, turn the female body into a renewable source of labor and loyalty? We'll move through evidence, texts, laws, graffiti, epitaphs cautiously. We'll map the system that made you visible when useful and invisible when dangerous. We'll follow you into rooms where decisions sounded like kindness but read like contracts. And at each turn we'll ask, who gave the order, who wrote it down, and who paid the price? The first answers are in books written by men who never scrubbed a floor. Anchor 1, the Rome. In the Agri Cultura, Cato the Elder outlines how a vilica, a female farm manager, should live. Obedient, sober, busy. Avoid neighbors. Never host guests. Always fear her husband's authority. It reads like a manual for controlling a woman in service of property. It tells us not only who commands, but how discipline is domesticized. Anchor 2, Italy. In Re Rustica, Varro describes the ergastulum, an estate prison for slaves. He advises on chained labor, on production targets, on tools that speak versus tools that don't. Scholars debate how literal the architecture was and whether underground prisons were universal. But the lexicon, chains, overseers, breeding incentives, sets a baseline for rural discipline. Anchor 3, Pompeii, Campania. In the Lupanar, graffiti record prices for sex in asses and boast of clients. Archaeology links these rooms to commercial sex. Many workers were enslaved, including women. Their names are often diminutives, their voices caught in transactional shorthand. The words are not literary. They are ledgers on plaster. Each anchor is a lens. Cato narrows the domestic world to obedience. Varro industrializes bodies. Pompeii monetizes touch. None of these are courtroom transcripts. They are fragments and they demand careful reading. But with stratigraphy and context, a picture emerges. Female slaves were managed at home, surveilled on estates, and sold in markets, sometimes for labor, sometimes for sex, sometimes for birth. Notice the forensic shape of the data. Prescriptive texts, what elites said should happen. Material remains, what walls and floors absorbed. Price lists, what someone was willing to pay. When these align, confidence rises. When they contradict, we hedge. Yet even the gaps tell a story. What Rome didn't bother to record speaks to who counted as a citizen worth remembering. The words on stone are cold. The system that used them was not. Hierarchy. At the top sits the dominus or domina, legal owners. Beneath them, The steward, vilicus, and sometimes a vilica, intermediate managers who could be enslaved or free. Then the layers of labor: household slaves, cleaners, cooks, ornitresses, hairdressers, nutresses, nurses, workshop hands, weavers, dyers, and field gangs. Children born in-house, vernae, sit in a separate column, raised inside, trained early, tied to the household by habit and hope. Architecture and logistics. Urban houses create surveillance corridors, narrow service halls, back staircases, slave dormer rooms near kitchens, courtyards where work and display mingle. Rural estates fold work into ergastula or barrack-like quarters. Terms are contested, but the point is containment. The city funnels labor to markets. The countryside pulls labor to harvests. Movement requires permission. Space disciplines behavior, bureaucracy. Rome's greatest technology is paperwork. Wills, manumission registers, sale contracts, dowry inventories. Law schools and jurists refine status as if it were geometry. A crucial line: a slave cannot enter legal marriage. Any union is contubernium, a tolerated cohabitation without civil standing. Children follow the status of the mother at birth. That rule is simple and devastating. It writes reproduction into the profit model. Money, skilled women, wet nurses, seamstresses, hairdressers, command higher prices and produce luxury value. Sexual access, while not neatly priced in law, becomes profitable in practice. Power. Control of bodies signals household rank. A mistress who keeps order proves her virtue. A master who rewards or withholds manumission. Freedom binds loyalty. Fear. Corporal discipline polices the line between person and property. Laws like the Lex Patronia, 19 CE, modestly limit extremes, e.g. throwing slaves to beasts, but confirm the owner's authority. If a slave woman bears a child, the household acquires an asset. If she is manumitted, the household gains a client obligated by gratitude and legal ties. Either way, the system wins. The calculus encourages monitoring menstruation, pairing partners within the household, or purchasing girls young to shape them into verni mothers. That's the map. You live at its center, rarely on its edges. Now walk the route the map forces you to take. You might be born in the household of Verna, or brought in through sale or capture. If born, your first language is theirs. Your first gods are in their cupboard. You learn tasks the way other children learn games. Fold linen, carry water, don't be noticed. The house bends you to rhythm. If bought, the first lessons are different. Your name may be cut to a syllable. Your accent makes you conspicuous. You watch the other girls to learn which corners are safe, which looks mean danger, which requests aren't requests. A chain around the ankle is rare in a city house, but a chain of obligations is not. Training is touch-based. The feel of marble dust that never leaves the skin, the heat curve of an oven door, the way a bronze mirror humbles the face. The lady of the house might smile when you style her hair. The smile is a test. The steward records the day you bled and the day you missed. He will say it's for your diet, it's for inventory. In several regions, vernae had slightly better odds of manumission, especially if they served close to the family. But better odds is not a promise. It's a rumor that makes you try harder, work quieter, forgive sooner. People ask later how you survived. The answer is not poetry. It's compliance, calculation, and the occasional resistant mistake. A dropped platter that cannot be proved deliberate. The house notices. It always notices. The next room teaches what being noticed costs. Domestic labor puts you on stage. You are visible to masters, guests, merchants, and their eyes. You wash, dress, and keep time. Soak grain, air wool, warm water to the temperature the mistress likes. Hot, not scalding. You are valuable when you anticipate, invisible when you succeed, and dangerously visible when you refuse. Records suggest household hierarchies pitted women against women. The domina could be your protector or your most exacting judge because her honor was measured by your behavior. If you are suspected of flirting, it stains her status. If you are pregnant, the rumor stains it further. The punishment may come as extra work or removal from sight. A sale is cleaner than scandal. Sexual access is not codified in a price list as neatly as laundry. But satire and letters, an imperfect lens, show norms. A master's entitlement, a guest's assumption, a steward's brokerage. It is not every night, not every house, not every man, but it is a possibility that shapes how you hold your body near doors. There is a trick you learn: stay useful. A nurse who knows the child's cough, a hairdresser who reads the mistress's moods, a seamstress who can cut a toga to flatter. Usefulness buys pauses, if not safety. but pauses end. Beyond the courtyard is work that doesn't stop at dusk. Rural estates speak a different dialect of power. Here, quantity matters: amphorae of oil, sacks of grain, yardages of wool. The overseer counts production, not people, until he must. Varro's ergastulum sits somewhere between architecture and threat. Some estates likely kept barracks above ground. Some may have had sunken rooms. Archaeology is patchy. Scholars debate the form. What doesn't change is the function. Contain labor, compress time, reduce choices. If you are sent from house to estate, it can be a punishment or a logistics decision. Either way, you vanish. The fields make your back strong in ways the city never did. The looms thicken your fingertips. The wage is not money, but rations. Pregnancy in the fields is a paradox. Your increased burden brings increased value to the dominus. Your failing strength brings risk to production. The overseer resolves the paradox crudely: push now, rest later, or be replaced. In some regions, estate women acted as spinners, weavers, and millers, work that anchors the entire supply chain. You are bread and clothing before you are a person. Night in barracks is loud with coughs. Someone sings a homeland song in a language half the room can't remember. Sleep comes because dawn will come whether you sleep or not. In the city, the song has a price. The Lupanar of Pompeii preserves a menu of transactions. Graffiti list acts and amounts. Frescoes dress the walls in a language of appetite. Scholars caution: archaeology cannot tag every worker's status with certainty, but many were enslaved. Names are diminutives. The rooms lock from the outside. The house is built to move men through quickly and keep women still. You may not be in a brothel. You may be a kept girl in a merchant's upper room or a cupbearer who also answers midnight knocks. The law doesn't bless this with ceremony, but it doesn't prosecute the buyer either. It turns its face as long as public order holds. Prices undercut consent. Choice becomes an owner's decision or a calculation of lesser harms by a woman people call a choice maker, but never ask. The city is trained not to look too long. Looking too long would make the bread taste different. Sometimes you learn leverage: a favored client who brings tips, a way to pass messages, a chance to keep a secret worth exchanging. But leverage is temporary. A sale resets the game. For some, the only durable leverage is a child. Within the household, contubernium, a permitted cohabitation between enslaved people, looks like marriage, feels like family, and holds like twine. Rome doesn't recognize it in law, but households often do because stability is productive. The mistress approves if it keeps you modest. The master approves if it keeps the nursery fed. If you bear a child while enslaved, law fixes the outcome. The child follows your status. Owners know this. Some encourage pregnancies among vernae to grow wealth at home. Some sell children young to liquidate assets. There are letters where masters boast of freeing faithful wet nurses in their wills. For each of those, there are many no one wrote. Faith offers you rituals that don't ask for papers. The lares in the corner shrine. The cult of Isis in certain neighborhoods where women come with problems men name domestic. Rituals cannot change status, but they can organize hope, and sometimes a network of women who watch for each other. Manumission dangles like a lantern, a promise after years of compliance, or a reward for bearing a master's child, or a negotiation when your labor outgrows your price. Freed women can marry, run shops, adopt names that answer to no overseer. But manumission often comes with patronage obligations, a legal leash. You learn, painfully, that freedom is a boundary with doors that swing one way. When those doors open, it's usually because someone else turned the key. The morning begins like any other. Heat rolling into the courtyard, the cook's apprentice coughing smoke, a merchant at the gate with a ledger under his arm. Then the steward calls for silence. His voice is formal. So is the silence. A child's bracelet is missing. Gold small, a gift with a carved dolphin. The mistress clenches her jaw so tight you can hear the hinge. The master's face is smooth, practiced calm that means nothing good. The tribunal is not a court of law. It is a room rearranged. Chair in the center, benches along the wall, a table for objects that matter. You stand with the other women, nurse, hairdresser, seamstress, maid, caught in a net of glances. The steward calls a name, not yours. The nurse steps forward. She is older than you, with competent hands and eyes that know sleep only by rumor. Questions come like pebbles thrown at a pond, each one sending rings outward. Where were you? Who came into the nursery? Who touched the jewelry box? The nurse answers, voice low. She does not look at the mistress. She knows where the power sits. You inhale at the wrong time and choke on the air. The steward's gaze lands on you, then slides away. He doesn't need you for this scene. The merchant steps forward. He is a jeweler, he says, and he will pay good money for the bracelet should it be found. His eyes are on the mistress, but he is selling something else. A solution that doesn't involve scandal. The master nods. The room breathes. A girl from the laundry blurts she saw the seamstress near the nursery. The seamstress flares in anger, which reads as guilt. The nurse studies the floor. The mistress studies the nurse. It ends quickly, without proof. The seamstress will be sold, not for theft proven in a court, but for risk. The nurse will remain. The child knows her smell. The merchant will return tomorrow because tomorrow the house will be ready to forget today. After, in the quiet that follows decisions, the mistress draws you aside. She speaks softly. There is a child due in winter. The nurse has served long and has no milk left to spare. The mistress would like you to prepare yourself. The phrase is clean, like the floors you keep clean. It means what it means. You nod because there is no grammatical structure for refusal in this room. That night you sit by the kitchen fire and calculate. If you bear a child, the house gains value. If the master manumits you after, it will be called generosity. If not, it will be called policy. You repeat to yourself what the older women whisper. Survive long enough for options. Outside, the city is loud. Inside, the house hums with a well-fed calm. Someone plucks the child's bracelet from beneath a couch cushion, laughs softly and slides it into a sleeve. She will return it in the morning. The seamstress will still be sold. The tribunal is over. The lesson is not. Tomorrow, the steward opens the ledger with a new column. Anchor 4, Rome. In Seneca, the Younger's Epistulae Morales 47, he scolds those who treat slaves as animals, breaking their silence at meals, punishing minor errors brutally. He argues for humane treatment, but from a master's chair. His rhetoric confirms a norm, cruelties common enough to require rebuke. Anchor 5, Rome. The jurist Gaius explains status rules in the institutes. Enslaved people cannot contract legal marriage. Unions are contubernia, and the child's status follows the mother at birth. This is not commentary. It's legal geometry that underwrites the economy. Anchor 6, Rome. The lex alia sentia restricts manumission, especially for slaves under 30, requiring council approval and imposing intermediate statuses. It curbs casual freeing, ensuring that freedom flows through controlled gates. Women's emancipation thus becomes a policy choice, not a household whim. Ergastulum architecture. Some scholars argue the underground prison was more rhetorical threat than standard building type. Others note material hints of confinement on estates. The consensus is nuance. Forms varied by region and wealth, sex work and status. Pompeii's Lupanar graffiti trace prices and acts, but assigning slave status to every worker is overreach. The safest claim is that many were enslaved and that the architecture and locks suggest containment. On suppression, rather than institutional cover-ups, it's more accurate to say curatorial choices historically softened labels. Museum texts once emphasized prostitution without discussing enslavement, a framing that has gradually shifted. Where dates and institutions vary, we avoid blanket claims. The larger point is the language used to describe women's labor often hid ownership behind commerce. When law meets ledger, policy becomes intimate. Stand back from the rooms and look at the system's quiet hinge. The child follows the mother's status. That rule, laid out by jurists and folded into contracts, turns your body into the most reliable supply chain Rome ever built. For an owner, skills can be bought at market. But loyalty, or something that looks like it, grows best at home. The vernachild knows the household smells, custom gods. He or she can be trained without translation. The cost of purchase disappears into the cost of rations. The risk of revolt diminishes when people measure their futures inside the walls that shape their childhood. Your fertility, then, becomes a line in a business plan. The steward's ledgers may not use that word. They might list births, weaning, assignments, but implicitly every child extends wealth. The rule that status follows the mother discourages owners from risking freeborn paternity claims. It also encourages them to manage pregnancies among enslaved women, whose children will securely increase assets. This is why the household watches your calendar. This is why the mistress asks you to prepare yourself. This is why the rumor of manumission after faithful service or after bearing a certain child holds such power. It aligns your hope with their profit. The system doesn't always need chains when it has incentives. None of this means every master planned like a modern accountant. Many were improvised tyrants. Some were reluctant participants. A few were genuinely kind in ways that mattered. But laws like the Lex Aelia Sentia shape the background. Freedom is scarce by design. Texts like Gaius make reproduction safe as property. Manual writers like Cato and Varro give managers a language of control that slides easily from field to nursery. Now the hardest line. When you hold a child who came from your body and hear others mark that child as someone's asset, you understand Rome's genius wasn't aqueducts or roads. It was the ability to take intimate human bonds and turn them into infrastructure. The nurse's song becomes a stabilizer. The seamstress's skill becomes display. Your womb becomes policy. This is the final reveal. The empire's endurance owed as much to women it refused to legally see as to senators it carved in marble. The quiet rooms, the whispered instructions, the ledgers that listed linen and births together. These were the empire's hidden aqueducts, carrying obedience from one generation to the next. And yet, even infrastructure has leaks. Think back to the atrium's dark mirror. You stand in front of it with the bracelet found, the seamstress gone, and a winter promise that is not a choice. The house is secure. The empire hums. What did it cost? It cost the erasures that law made permanent. Marriages declared not marriages. Families made contingent, stories unrecorded because the writer didn't see the point. It cost the labor that turned rooms into theaters of control. It cost the bargains women made with themselves to endure, to hope, to game the system for a sliver of light. The lesson about power is not exotic. Control thrives in proximity, in rooms where favors are currency, where ledgers sit beside cradles, where discipline looks like kindness because the voice that orders you speaks softly. Systems don't need secrecy when they have routine. This matters now because routine still decides whose bodies become infrastructure and whose stories become footnotes. When policy touches the intimate, it reshapes the world quietly, efficiently, almost politely. The atrium pool is still. Your reflection wavers as a draft crosses the room. Somewhere in the house, a baby cries and a woman answers. You steady the bowl, steady your breath, steady the thought that almost speaks. Because some evidence is dangerous when it's written down, and yet it is the only way it survives. If this journey through Rome's corridors left you with questions, you're not alone. The empire's greatness rested on rooms like these, ordinary spaces where policy turned personal. We traced one region in 2 centuries. There are other rooms, other laws, other ledgers. Next time we'll step east into late antique Constantinople, where imperial charity and household servitude traded places, and where a different legal language tried to tame the same instincts. What happens when a Christian empire meets an older economy of bodies? If you learned something here, subscribe and tell us in the comments. Which source or scene surprised you most? Your questions shape the next investigation.